Very good evening and a very warm welcome to State of Business on our television. I am Savindri Jayawardena. Let's look at the top stories for the day. Government plans to increase pharmaceutical production meeting the country's drug demand. The Palm Oil Industry Association appeals the government for relief just to reduce their losses. News in detail. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa says that the structure of the state ministries is formulated this time with the aim of building a people-centric national economy in which the people have the right to the economy. President made these observations at a discussion held at the Presidential Secretariat yesterday while reviewing the subject scope of state ministerial portfolios. Accordingly, President Rajapaksa explained the reasons for the creation of a state ministry on the production of batik, handloom fabrics and local garments. President Rajapaksa said that Sri Lanka will not be able to move forward without developing the local economy until the rest of the countries that have been in deep crisis with COVID-19 recover. The garment industry accounts for 43% of the country's total exports and it contributes about $5 billion annually to export earnings. Accordingly, the garment industry plays a pioneering role in providing employment and regional development. President also said that strengthening and developing batik and handloom fabrics and local garment production is a major objective of the government. Thus, President also instructed officials to prepare an all-inclusive plan to uplift the batik and handicraft industry. He also pointed out that companies such as Salusala could create a market for batik and handloom fabric manufacturers. Chamber of Presidential Task Force for Economic Revival and Poverty Reduction, Basil Rajapaksa stresses that the government plans to increase the manufacturing of pharmaceutical products by targeting exports, being on par with the countries such as Ireland, Israel and Singapore while meeting the country's drug demand within the next 5 years. Basil Rajapaksa made these observations at a discussion held at the Temple Trees yesterday with officials representing the health sector. Accordingly, Chairman of Presidential Task Force for Economic Revival and Poverty Reduction, Basil Rajapaksa pointed out that the government is having plans to allow private investors to build export-quality pharmaceutical manufacturing facilities in Sri Lanka in the coming years. Prime Minister's media unit issuing a statement says that currently the government spends a large amount of foreign currency to import 85% of the pharmaceutical needed by Sri Lanka. Furthermore, Basil Rajapaksa states that the people who have given a large mandate to implement the President's vision for prosperity policy are looking forward for a clear change in the health sector and seek the assistance of relevant institutions in the health sector and the export sector to bring about that change. Rajapaksa further said that Sri Lanka, which is at the forefront of the garment export sector, has the potential to become a leader in the field of pharmaceutical exports within the next 5 years. Minister of Health Pavitra Vanyarachi, State Minister of Pharmaceutical Supply and Regulation Professor Channa Jayasumana, Secretary to the Ministry of Health Major General Sanjeeva Munasinghe and several other officials were present at the occasion. In the meantime, the central bank states that the Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index continued to expand in July this year, recording 64.6 points, mainly due to the expansion in new orders and production sub-indices. The new orders and production sub-indices expanded, yet at a slower rate, benefiting from new orders received in July 2020. Respondents highlighted that the restrictions imposed on importation of certain categories of goods adversely affected some manufacturing activities. The overall expectations for manufacturing activities for the next 3 months improved, yet the manufacturers are still concerned that the subdued external demand due to the COVID-19 pandemic would continue to exert pressure on their business activities. Services sector continued to expand for the second consecutive month, with PMI reaching 51.4 in July 2020. This was underpinned by the expansions observed in new businesses, business activities and expectations for activity compared to June 2020, indicating a further recovery in the services sector, which was affected by COVID-19 pandemic. New businesses, particularly in financial services and insurance subsectors, improved in July 2020 with the gradual recovery in economic activities. But employment continued to decline in July 2020 for the sixth consecutive month, owing to halt in new recruitments. Stay tuned for more news right after this break. Welcome back after the break. Official data showed that Central Bank has bought $162.5 million from the interbank forex markets in July 2020 after negative private credit in May and June. Data also revealed that the country's forex reserves picked up by $400 million to $7.1 billion in July after $500 million swap from the Reserve Bank of India. In May and June, private credit was negative, though the public sector deficit expanded as tax revenues fell partly due to a so-called fiscal stimulus involving value added and other tax cuts. In June, the central bank also bought dollars on a net basis, purchasing $69 million and selling $9.25 million. By purchasing dollars, the central bank can stop the currency appreciating as credit turns negative in an explicit or implicit de facto real effective exchange rate targeting exercise. Except after the 2009 crisis, the central bank has kept the exchange rate close to the level the peg had broken and prevented appreciation, in the worst record among South Asian monetary authorities. During the March to April liquidity injection cycle, the rupee fell from around 182 to close to 200 to the US dollar. It was then kept around 185 to the US dollar in July. Over the last 2 weeks, the rupee had been allowed to appreciate silently. Accordingly, official data showed that central bank has bought $162.5 million from the interbank forex markets in July 2020 after negative private credit in May and June. The Palm Oil Industry Association warns that plantation companies will face a cumulative loss of more than $500 million within the months due to policy discrepancies and vacillation by the government on a well-regulated expansion of Sri Lanka's oil palm cultivation. The Palm Oil Industry Association says 356,000 oil palm plants imported as per a government decision to expand cultivation have been maturing in nurseries for more than 3 years due to the government's failure to address concerns arising from disinformation spread by misled activists and lobbies with vested interests. The Palm Oil Industry Association's president, Dr. Rohan Fernando, stresses that about 40% of these trees may already be unviable and that the entire stock may have to be destroyed within the next 2 months unless the government resolves this matter soon. The association further states that Sri Lanka has less than 11,000 hectares under oil palm, which is just over 1% of the extents under tea, rubber and coconut, and plantation companies had been mandated to increase the total area under oil palm to 20,000 hectares under strictly enforced guidelines before the government backpedaled off the plan. The association appeals to the government for permission to plant whatever viable trees that are left in the nurseries, since it would enable the plantation companies to reduce the losses they are faced with and help increase local production of palm oil at a time when imports are being restricted to conserve foreign exchange. Furthermore, the Palm Oil Industry Association pointed out that baseless vilification of the local palm oil industry has resulted in the country producing only 23,000 tons of palm oil per annum while importing a staggering amount of 220,000 tons of crude palm oil into the country each year at a cost of approximately 22 billion rupees. Criminal lawyer Mahesh Senaratne stresses that the legal and relevant authorities should handle the cases of domestic abuse with high level of empathy and care without aggravating the psychological status of the victim. Criminal lawyer Mahesh Senaratne made these observations joining the Art Talk Walk discussion program, which will be aired on Art Television at 6:30 p.m. tomorrow.
Very often I find that even if it's a police station or if the victim comes to a lawyer, that there is not enough empathy in that situation to understand how much of courage it has taken a person to come forward to that point, because that victim is fighting patriarchy, that person is fighting social stigma, that person is fighting her parents most of the time, because her parents don't want that stigma of going to courts and this concept of washing the dirty laundry in the open and all that sort of thing. So, and also I think something that we need to take into account is it doesn't always start with physical abuse. It starts with mental abuse. From that point onwards, when you go to court, you still need to be very sensitive to that person's needs, what you disclose, how you disclose. I mean, you always have the option, if it's a very serious case, you always have the option of asking the judge to hold it in camera.
Stay tuned for more news right after this break. Welcome back after the break. The trading at Colombo Stock Exchange ended on a positive note today. The All-Share Price Index gained 28.31 points to close at 5,279.92, and the S&P SL20 gained 14.15 points to close at 2,331.14. The turnover was 1.7 billion rupees and over 72 million shares were traded. Up next are Forex rates. That's all news for today. See you tomorrow with State of Business at 7:45 p.m. Until then, take care and good night.